at 4 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz. The Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln goes completely silent. The screens haven't just lost radar. They have been hijacked. Outside in the dark, 200 suicide drones and 40 fast attack boats are closing in, and the world's most advanced defense system is completely blind. The commander has exactly 90 seconds to make a decision that will either save 5,000 American sailors or start World War III. This is the story of the analog protocol. To truly comprehend the terrifying reality of this situation, we must first shatter the illusion of absolute technological invincibility that has comforted the public for decades. The narrative we are often sold is one of perfect intercepts, overwhelming superiority, and push-button victories from afar. However, those who study modern naval warfare understand that a devastating vulnerability exists at the very heart of our most advanced defense systems. The frustration among strategic analysts is palpable because this vulnerability is rarely discussed openly. We are witnessing a fundamental shift in the mechanics of global conflict, transitioning from a reliance on heavy, multi-million-dollar platforms to the terrifying efficiency of asymmetric, attritional warfare. This shift revolves around two critical concepts: target saturation and localized electronic warfare. Target saturation is not a failure of armor, it is a failure of mathematics. The United States Navy utilizes the Aegis Baseline 10 combat system, an absolute marvel of modern engineering integrated with the SPY-6 active electronically scanned array radar. It is designed to track over 2,000 targets from the surface of the ocean to the edge of space, processing billions of calculations per second. It is a system built to defend against highly sophisticated, expensive threats like advanced fighter jets or supersonic cruise missiles. The interceptors used by the Aegis system, such as the Standard Missile-2, cost approximately $2 million each. They are exquisite pieces of technology. But what happens when an adversary bypasses the high-end fight completely? What happens when they deploy a swarm of 300 cheap, $20,000 plastic drones? The economic and tactical equation completely inverts. The American fleet is suddenly forced into a desperate position, compelled to exhaust its limited supply of multi-million-dollar interceptors just to swat down disposable flying lawnmowers. If the vertical launch system cells run dry before the real, lethal threats arrive, the billion-dollar steel hull of a supercarrier is left completely exposed. Compounding this mathematical nightmare is the fragility of the digital domain. The modern military operates entirely within a connected, network-centric environment. Every sensor, every radar, and every automated defense cannon is linked through complex data sharing protocols. If an adversary can sever or corrupt those links, the physical hardware becomes instantly useless. The billion-dollar missiles stay locked in their tubes. The automated phalanx cannons cease their tracking algorithms. The screens go dark. This is the missing modern perspective that keeps defense planners awake at night. We spend our time preparing for physical hardware clashes, but we are completely unequipped for the terrifying reality of cyber warfare and artificial intelligence command failures. We are unprepared for the moment when the machines fail and American forces are forced to fight entirely analog. This exact nightmare scenario materialized in the dark waters of the Persian Gulf. The trap was not set in a matter of minutes. It was meticulously orchestrated over several months, originating in a secret underground base carved deep into the coastal cliffs of western Iran. The commanders of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps understood that challenging the USS Abraham Lincoln directly in a conventional confrontation was a collective death warrant. The carrier is a mobile fortress, escorted by guided missile destroyers that wield the power of a god. To defeat this entity, the enemy did not rely on overwhelming firepower. They relied on overwhelming deception. They required a Trojan horse to bypass the outer defensive perimeters of the strike group without raising a single alarm. Their weapon of choice was an aging, rusted commercial oil tanker. In the Strait of Hormuz, the world's busiest maritime choke point, millions of barrels of oil transit daily. A slow-moving commercial vessel blending into the chaotic background noise of international shipping traffic is virtually invisible to the threat matrix algorithms of the Aegis system. It is categorized as civilian, routine, and harmless. But this specific tanker had been completely hollowed out. Its massive cargo holds did not contain crude oil. They were packed with customized short-range transmission arrays, highly classified jamming equipment, and a localized malware payload specifically engineered to exploit microscopic vulnerabilities in the commercial maritime automatic identification system. As the American Carrier Strike Group navigated the treacherous and narrow shipping lanes of the strait, the rusted Trojan horse continuously adjusted its heading, matching the speed of the current and gradually narrowing the distance to the American ships to just under 8 nautical miles. The radar operators inside the Combat Information Center of the Lincoln saw the vessel on their screens, but the automated tags confirmed its civilian status. The fleet sailed onward, completely unaware that a digital guillotine was hovering directly above their network. At exactly 359 hours, the execution order was given. The operatives aboard the disguised tanker did not activate a standard, loud jamming frequency. A massive blast of electronic noise would have instantly triggered a hostile response protocol from the American electronic warfare officers, resulting in the immediate destruction of the tanker. Instead, the enemy utilized a surgical approach. They transmitted a highly concentrated, heavily encrypted data packet directed precisely at the carrier's primary receiver antennas. This transmission was camouflaged as a routine, localized maritime weather and navigation update. The malware slipped past the outer firewalls and infected the localized network of the strike group. It was an insidious, elegant piece of malicious coding. It was not designed to physically destroy the Aegis processors. It was designed to completely blind them through sensory overload. Within a fraction of a second, the SPY-6 radar screens inside the Combat Information Center were flooded with thousands of ghost signatures. The system suddenly registered impossible data points, hundreds of supersonic targets appearing from beneath the sea, ballistic trajectories originating from empty airspace, and commercial flights suddenly changing course to dive directly at the deck. The artificial intelligence processing units of the Aegis Baseline 10 system fought desperately to calculate the trajectories of these non-existent threats. The system became fatally overloaded. To prevent the hardware from physically melting down due to the catastrophic processing strain, the automated safety protocols autonomously engaged. The system initiated an uncommanded total reboot. The blue glow of the radar screens vanished. The Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln plunged into absolute, terrifying darkness. The world's most advanced defense system was completely blind. This electronic blackout was not the ultimate goal of the operation. It was merely the prerequisite. The enemy knew that the American system would eventually reboot, that the technicians would purge the malware and restore the digital shield. The window of opportunity was measured in seconds, not minutes. And in that brief window, the true physical ambush commenced. Under the cover of total darkness and crippling electronic confusion, the assault force surged from their camouflaged coastal caves. 200 Shahid 136 suicide drones were launched simultaneously from hidden mobile racks along the Iranian coastline. They flew completely silent, skimming the surface of the Persian Gulf at an altitude of less than 10 meters to remain below the curvature of the Earth and hidden from the physical sight lines of the ship's lookouts. Accompanied by 40 fast attack boats of the Peykaap-class, painted pitch black and armed with heavy machine guns and supercavitation torpedoes, the swarm accelerated toward the blinded American fleet. The trap was fully sprung. The ultimate test of the analog protocol had begun. Inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the reality of the situation settles over the crew like a physical weight. The screens remain pitch black. The tactical data links are completely severed. The automated threat evaluation and weapon assignment algorithms, the digital brain that normally manages the flawless defense of the carrier strike group, are completely offline. The commander issues an order that has not been spoken in a major American naval engagement since the Second World War. Weapons free, manual optical targeting only. The analog protocol is officially authorized. Topside, the deafening silence of the disabled phalanx close-in weapon systems is replaced by the raw, mechanical clatter of heavy machine guns. Sailors and Marines, suddenly stripped of their absolute reliance on radar-guided targeting, rush to man the twin 50 caliber mounts along the catwalks. They are forced to rely on night vision goggles and thermal scopes, peering into the pitch-black void of the Persian Gulf. The first wave of Shahed 136 suicide drones enters the acoustic envelope. The low, menacing buzz of their commercial two-stroke engines fills the humid air, an asymmetric nightmare descending upon a billion-dollar asset. Suddenly, the darkness is shattered by the brilliant, chaotic arcs of tracer fire. The American defenders laid down a desperate, manual wall of lead. The discipline of the crew is absolute, but the sheer mathematics of target saturation begin to take a terrifying toll. Explosions blossom over the water as 50 caliber rounds tear through the cheap fiberglass airframes of the incoming drones. Flaming shrapnel rains down on the flight deck. But the swarm is simply too massive. Without the automated tracking of the Aegis system calculating precise intercept geometry, human error and limited optical range mean the interception rate rapidly plummets. A drone slips through the defensive curtain of fire, slamming violently into the starboard elevator. The detonation violently shakes the supercarrier. Damage control teams scramble through the smoke-filled corridors. Out on the surrounding water, the 40 black-painted fast attack boats of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps launch their initial volley of supercavitation torpedoes and short-range rockets. The American guided missile destroyers, typically capable of obliterating these small craft from 50 nautical miles away, are now forced into brutal, close-quarters combat, frantically dodging torpedo wakes in the dark. The situation is rapidly deteriorating. The fleet is bleeding, caught in a carefully orchestrated trap designed specifically to exploit their vulnerability to localized electronic warfare. But the planners in the underground Iranian bunkers made a single, fatal miscalculation. They assumed the localized electronic blackout would isolate the carrier group entirely. They failed to account for a strategic asset loitering at an altitude of 60,000 feet, looking down upon the chaotic battlefield like an apex predator in the stratosphere. 4 F-22 Raptors, launched hours earlier from Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, are circling high above the fray. They are maintaining a super cruise speed of Mach 1.5 without afterburners. They are too high to be heard, too fast to be caught, and too stealthy to be seen by the enemy's coastal radars. The F-22 is widely known by the public as the world's premier dogfighter, but in modern strategic warfare, its most devastating weapon is not a missile. It is its unparalleled ability to process and distribute massive amounts of information. It is the ultimate quarterback of the sky. The Raptors are flying well above the localized electronic jamming dome that has completely blinded the American fleet below. The squadron leader activates an ALR-94 passive sensor system. This highly classified suite of antennas, seamlessly embedded into the very skin of the aircraft, transforms the fighter into a massive, flying electronic vacuum. Without emitting a single active radar wave that could potentially reveal their position to enemy air defenses, the F-22s begin to absorb every electronic signature on the battlefield below. The advanced artificial intelligence processors aboard the Raptors instantly analyze the data, triangulating the exact GPS coordinates of every single Iranian fast attack boat and identifying the disguised commercial tanker that is currently orchestrating the drone swarm's jamming signals. The F-22 pilots do not dive into the low-altitude dogfight. They remain in the freezing silence of the upper atmosphere, executing a brilliant and highly classified tactical pivot, utilizing the secure multi-function advanced data link, a frequency entirely impervious to the lower-level commercial jamming. The Raptor squadron begins feeding precise targeting coordinates directly to a squadron of F-15E Strike Eagles. These Strike Eagles are flying low over the sea, approaching from behind the American fleet. They are heavily laden, their weapons racks equipped with hundreds of APKWS laser-guided rockets and small-diameter bombs. These pilots do not need to turn on their own radars. They do not need to visually acquire the targets. They only need to follow the digital targeting roadmap being painted by the invisible quarterbacks soaring high above them. The counterattack is swift, silent, and entirely merciless. The F-15 Strike Eagles unleash a torrent of precision-guided munitions, firing from a distance based solely on the continuous data feed from the Raptors. On the surface of the Persian Gulf, the Iranian speedboat fleet suddenly begins erupting into massive fireballs in rapid succession. The enemy crews have absolutely no warning. Their radar warning receivers remain completely silent because the attacking aircraft are not actively tracking them. They're being systematically erased by an unseen executioner. Simultaneously, target data regarding the disguised commercial tanker, the Trojan horse emitting the crippling malware, is processed. A barrage of laser-guided rockets strikes the rusted vessel. The ship's illicit transmission antennas are instantly vaporized, and the hull breaks apart under the immense kinetic force. The localized electronic jamming field immediately collapses. Aboard the USS Abraham Lincoln, the blue glow of the Spy 6 radar screens suddenly flickers back to life in the Combat Information Center. The Aegis Baseline 10 system automatically reboots, its artificial intelligence processors instantly categorizing the remaining airborne threats. The automated phalanx cannons spin up with a terrifying mechanical whine, instantly shredding the few remaining Shahid drones in an impenetrable wall of depleted uranium. The immediate surface threat has been neutralized by a masterful combination of fifth-generation airborne data, sharing, and sheer, unyielding analog grit from the deck crews. The American sailors who fought off the swarm with heavy machine guns breathe a momentary sigh of relief. The trap has been broken. However, deep within the Zagros Mountains, the Iranian Aerospace Force commander watches the telemetry data from his fast attack fleet completely flatline. The swarm has failed. The carrier is damaged but still highly operational. The electronic ambush has been systematically dismantled. Knowing perfectly well that a devastating American retaliatory strike is now inevitable, the commander realizes he has absolutely nothing left to lose. He bypasses standard authorization protocols and plays his final, most terrifying strategic card. He orders the immediate activation of the strategic reserve. Deep within reinforced subterranean silos carved into the mountain rock, massive blast doors slide open. The automated launch sequences are initiated for 3 FATA, 2 hypersonic ballistic missiles. These are not cheap, disposable drones or short-range rockets. These are strategic weapons representing the pinnacle of the enemy's aerospace engineering, capable of flying at speeds exceeding Mach 15. They are designed to execute complex, unpredictable orbital maneuvers that render traditional anti-ballistic missile systems obsolete, and they carry a warhead payload powerful enough to crack the keel of a supercarrier in a single, devastating kinetic strike. The early warning satellites of the United States Space Force instantly detect the massive thermal bloom of the solid fuel boosters igniting within the mountain range. The automated warning flashes aggressively across the command screens of the 5th Fleet in red text. Vampire, vampire, hypersonic inbound. The time until impact is measured in mere minutes. The analog survival of the American fleet has just triggered an unprecedented, apocalyptic escalation. The warning sirens inside the Combat Information Center of the USS Abraham Lincoln no longer wail, they scream. The automated voice of the threat evaluation system repeats a single, terrifying phrase over the internal communication network. Vampire, vampire, hypersonic inbound. The early warning satellites of the United States Space Force have instantly detected the massive thermal blooms of 3 solid fuel boosters igniting deep within the Zagros Mountains. These are not the cheap, disposable drones the fleet just fought off with heavy machine guns. These are FATA-2 hypersonic ballistic missiles, the absolute pinnacle of the enemy's aerospace engineering. They are hurtling toward the stratosphere at speeds exceeding Mach 15. To understand the sheer physics of this threat is to understand why the blood of every seasoned naval officer runs cold at the mention of the word hypersonic. At Mach 15, a missile is traveling at roughly 3 miles per second. The immense friction generated by slicing through the Earth's atmosphere at that staggering velocity creates a sheath of superheated plasma around the missile's airframe. This plasma acts as an electromagnetic shield, absorbing or deflecting standard radar waves, making tracking the warhead an absolute nightmare for conventional systems. But speed is not the primary danger of the FATA-2. Traditional ballistic missiles fly on predictable parabolic arcs. Once launched, their destination can be calculated with high school calculus, and interceptors can be placed in their path. The FATA-2, however, utilizes a hypersonic glide vehicle. Upon re-entering the Earth's atmosphere, it detaches from its massive booster and begins to surf the atmospheric layers, executing violent, unpredictable orbital maneuvers. It dips, weaves, and changes direction at speeds that would tear a conventional aircraft apart. It is a weapon designed specifically to render traditional anti-ballistic missile systems entirely obsolete. It carries a kinetic energy payload so devastating that a direct hit would crack the keel of the supercarrier, evaporating seawater instantly and sending 5,000 American sailors to the bottom of the Persian Gulf. The impact time is measured in mere minutes. The American fleet has survived the swarm, but they have just triggered an unprecedented, apocalyptic escalation. Aboard the supercarrier, the Aegis Baseline 10 system has successfully rebooted from the electronic warfare attack, but the localized malware injected by the disguised commercial tanker has left devastating residual effects. The digital brain of the fleet is awake, but its higher-level correlation algorithms are severely corrupted. As the SPY-6 active electronically scanned array radars attempt to paint the incoming hypersonic glide vehicles, the artificial intelligence processors desperately try to predict the erratic flight paths. The screens inside the Combat Information Center flicker wildly as the system generates thousands of conflicting intercept geometries. The computer simply cannot process the advanced mathematics of the hypersonic maneuvers while fighting off the remaining fragments of the digital infection. Time is evaporating. The missiles are 200 miles out, 150 miles out. The standard operating procedure for an Aegis-equipped vessel facing a ballistic threat is to allow the system to operate completely autonomously. The computers are supposed to assign the threat, calculate the exact intercept point, and launch the standard Missile 6 interceptors faster than human reflexes could ever manage. But the automated firing sequencer remains starkly illuminated in red on the commander's display. System error, correlation failure, firing solution locked. The billion-dollar defense grid, the pride of the American military-industrial complex, is completely paralyzed. It is waiting for perfect digital data that simply does not exist. The commander of the strike group, a veteran of decades of naval service, stares at the frozen digital displays. He understands instantly that if they wait for the artificial intelligence to resolve this mathematical paradox, the ship will be destroyed. He issues a command that contradicts every modern naval doctrine written in the last 30 years. He orders the complete manual override of the Aegis combat system. The analog protocol enters its final, most desperate phase. The officers in the Combat Information Center must now bypass the world's most advanced artificial intelligence and execute the intercept manually. They must rely on raw, unfiltered radar returns and their own human intuition. The air in the room is suffocatingly tense. The tactical action officer physically breaks the safety seal on the manual launch console, a completely analog panel of switches and dials designed as the ultimate failsafe. The radar operators stop relying on the automated tracking blocks. They look directly at the raw radio frequency wave returns, watching the jagged, unpredictable plasma streaks on their displays. They begin calling out coordinates aloud, their voices echoing in the cramped, dark room. Altitude 100,000 feet. Speed Mach 12. Bearing 045. Dropping. Maneuvering. The fire control officers frantically punch these raw numbers directly into the targeting computers of the SM-6 missiles sitting in the vertical launch cells. They are guessing the future position of a maneuvering hypersonic vehicle using nothing but analog tracking and sheer human grit. They are predicting where the missile will be based on its current erratic trajectory, effectively leading a target that is moving at 3 miles per second. 50 miles out, the time to impact is now measured in seconds. The commander gives the final manual authorization. Weapons release. Deep within the hull of the escorting guided missile destroyers, the electrical firing pulses bypass the frozen Aegis computers and travel directly to the vertical launch system cells. The massive armored hatches snap open. 6 SM-6 interceptors ignite their solid rocket motors simultaneously, creating a deafening roar that physically shakes the warships. They blast out of their cells, riding pillars of white-hot fire into the dark sky. The SM-6 is a marvel of engineering, but it is now flying semi-blind, heading toward a patch of empty sky dictated by the desperate calculations of the human crew below. As the interceptors reach the upper atmosphere, their onboard active radar seekers finally activate. For 3 agonizing seconds, there is absolutely nothing. The interceptors are flying into the void. Then, the active seekers pick up the massive, glowing plasma trails of the incoming Fada-2 missiles. The interceptors do not have time to maneuver smoothly. They violently adjust their control fins, pulling dozens of GS to correct their course. High above the Persian Gulf, directly on the edge of space, the kinetic collisions occur. There are no massive fireballs. In a thin atmosphere, the impact of the SM-6 interceptors against the hypersonic glide vehicles is sudden and absolute. The kinetic energy transfer is catastrophic. The incoming warheads are instantly pulverized into clouds of expanding vapor and superheated titanium fragments. The radar screens inside the Combat Information Center show that the 3 terrifying tracks suddenly shatter into thousands of harmless pieces of falling debris. The manual analog override has succeeded. Human intuition and disciplined training have just defeated the most advanced strategic weapons on the planet at the very last possible second. The silence that follows in the Combat Information Center is profound. The crew of the USS Abraham Lincoln has survived an unprecedented ambush. They have proven that the ultimate weapon system is not the Aegis radar, but the highly trained American sailor. But survival is only the first phase of the doctrine of deterrence. In Washington, the realization of what has just transpired sets off a chain reaction of geopolitical nightmare scenarios. The enemy has crossed a red line that cannot be ignored. The order is given to strike back, not just to repel, but to permanently eliminate the threat. A squadron of F-35 Lightning II stealth fighters, already airborne and operating under complete radio silence, receives the execution order. They are not targeting the speedboats on the water. They are ordered to strike the subterranean launch silos deep inside the Zagros Mountains. The pilots perform nap of the Earth flying, plunging into the mountain range at Mach 0.9 to evade the dense anti-aircraft fire. They weave through the rock faces, popping up at the last possible moment to drop 2,000-pound GBU-72 bunker-busting bombs down the concrete ventilation shafts of the enemy bases. The massive bombs penetrate the underground facilities, detonating inside the solid propellant storage rooms and triggering catastrophic secondary explosions that completely erase the enemy's strategic capability from the map. This is where the narrative usually ends in most military analyses, with a triumphant, consequence-free display of American firepower. But the reality of this retaliation is far more sobering. And this is the vital perspective that is constantly missing from the conversation. The destruction of those bases is not a clean ending. It is the ignition of a massive regional powder keg. The United States has successfully defended its fleet, but in doing so, it has been forced into a major conventional escalation. dropping heavy munitions deep inside sovereign foreign territory. The international community erupts. Global markets crash as the Strait of Hormuz effectively becomes a closed war zone. The era of low-stakes, push-button warfare is officially dead. The myth that billions of dollars in technology can guarantee a bloodless, effortless victory has been permanently shattered. We have spent the last 2 decades building an incredibly complex, interconnected digital military apparatus. We have designed ships and aircraft that operate like massive flying computers, relying entirely on algorithms, artificial intelligence, and flawless data link networks. But this engagement proved that our adversaries understand this dependency perfectly. They do not need to match our technological prowess. They only need to short-circuit it. When the billion-dollar systems failed, it was not the technology that saved the supercarrier. It was the highly disciplined, manual intervention of a U.S. crew operating in the absolute darkest conditions of combat. It was the physical grit of Marines on the catwalks with heavy machine guns, and the cold calculations of officers overriding automated software to manually fire interceptors. The ships survived, and the enemy's bases are reduced to ash. But the fundamental nature of modern warfare has permanently shifted. The illusion of absolute digital invincibility has evaporated. The commanders of tomorrow must recognize that the next great global conflict will not be won purely on screens or through automated fire control systems. It will be won by those who are prepared to fight when the screens go black. The era of relying entirely on digital dominance is over. The analog protocol is no longer a desperate backup plan. It is the absolute foundation of modern survival.